Okay, so in part one, I started by sketching in the background to the Planteray issue and what resulted from it. And in part two, I briefly touched on some of the common commentary and flashpoint that surrounded the company. Part three, I talked about more business and financial side of things and suggested a more even-handed and reality-based approach for those who are opposing the company or just, traffic in opinions. But in this part, I wanted to wrap up and issue a disclaimer as to what my own personal opinions on this matter are, since I've stayed out of this argument for a very long time, with good reason. So, am I on side with Mr. Gabriel and Planteray? I mean, clearly the proceeding almost makes it seem like I've drunk the cognac-aged, sugar-laced Kool-Aid, have been bought from top to bottom, and now I'm just another soulless, morality-bereft shill, towing the company line, which, for those who inevitably accuse me of that, says rather more about the brain-dead knee-jerk reflexes than their ability to do research or think critically. But no, I'm not. I disapprove of their methods, and I dislike their overly generous interpretation of what constitutes a Barbados or a Jamaican rum, using any old pretext, deliberate historical misinterpretation, any old document they can find on some failed experiment from fuck knows how long ago, so they can muddy the waters just so as to justify whatever it is that they do, and shoehorn that into what will end up being a substandard regulation or geographical indicator or PDO or what have you. I mean, I just don't like that. And I think it's been taken far too far already. I also have not asked Mr. Gabriel or Mr. Seal to comment on this article, and with respect to Mr. Gabriel, I've met and spoken to the man exactly one time in my life for all of 2 minutes. Never visited his distillery or his place in France, and I'm in the fortunate position, thank God, never have taken any coin from the man, which is reliably trotted out to attack one particular freelancer I know about, but no others who have done the same thing. I'm also not invested emotionally into this, the way that always puzzles me when I consider the anti-Planteray mouthings of some people whose entire online personas seem to be bound up in this one issue and make it seem like everybody else must be exactly the same, and who you would think would spontaneously combust if Planteray was to ever get its way. And so I'm in a position to take a colder and more nuanced approach to the matter. Not a more tolerant approach either, because in the matter of the GI, and my vote as a Caribbean native goes absolutely for a strong version espoused by the pre-existing distillers. As an aside, I do actually think that the nations of the Caribbean and the rum producers of Worcester should band together on this one and make a regional GI that encapsulates the best of such a strong version. That way value is indeed kept in the islands, it's consistent across the region, and there are indeed movements towards this, but it's to one island, then another island, then another island, as opposed to something a bit more regional and comprehensive. But I'd like to see it happen, but you know what, perhaps I'm just as idealistic or naive as everybody else, who knows. But in any case, I believe that this constant refrain about better rums being made with secondary aging in cognac and in the region of cognac should stop, or at least be reduced, and that the completely unnecessary dosing they practice should be reduced, if not actually eliminated, and more respect given to keeping value and production wholly in the islands. Yes, the production theory of word and the way they make rums is that using cognac methods to make rum enhances the rum, but come on, rum has a storied and noble tradition of its own that requires little such enhancement. And if you want to make spirits in the cognac way, then just make a fucking cognac and just leave rum alone, I also believe that the rum company name change took too damned long, but you know what? Now they've done it, we've gotten used to it, so that's gone away. And the only fallout is that they publicly committed to it and that it took forever. People thought it took too long and was being deliberately slow-walked, which to the detractors, of course, simply proved, as if it was needed, that nothing Planteray ever says can be trusted. What I won't do is proselytize unthinkingly for either standard or either of the two sides, because of course it is. It's Planteray on one side and everybody else in the other. And I do have a preference, absolutely, yes, but not a bias, which is a subtle distinction that eludes far too many people who get all pissy when they're called out on it. I will not hammer anyone who professes a liking for Planteray or Mount Gay or Foursquare. I won't bugle my preference from the rooftops, nor will I shamelessly genuflect in either side in order to show my supposed patriotism or support. There's a reason I don't have a Save Barbados Rum apparel. You know what? Barbados Rum doesn't need saving. It's doing just fine on its own. It's which form of Barbados Rum that needs saving and how you kind of like identify it that you might actually talk about. And that's really what this should be about, instead of all this flag waving that, distorts people's minds. Nothing is ever as simple as it seems or as clear-cut. We don't have enough information to go on, and not enough is known of the moves by the parties behind the scenes to make the case conclusively, no matter how much people like to believe otherwise. Some element of balanced thinking and fairness has to start making its way into the sphere of public discourse, because too much opinion is already masquerading as facts, and too few facts are available at all. The current iteration of the Barbados GI under consideration, which almost nobody commenting on has actually read, but on which everyone has a strident opinion, is a good example of facts not being in evidence. I also believe, probably with equal innocence or optimism as everybody else's, that reviewers and writers should make a conscious effort to be more honest in their motivations and more alert to being led around by the nose by public relations. See, the thing is, opinion shapers, writers, and commentators who claim to serve the public good by keeping it informed, and all of us like to believe we do, cannot and should not be seen as taking sides in such a producer-led issue. And it is a producer-led issue. It is, always has been. What are we doing taking sides for one or the other? We are surrendering our own independence and ability to comment objectively and fairly when we so clearly represent one or the other side. Now, you can, as a human being, have an opinion for one side or the other. Of course you can. You know, that is separate from your platform as a reviewer, writer, vlogger, blogger, commentator, or whatever. But I argue that this should be as clearly separated as possible. So therefore, Lance Surjbali can have his own opinion and voice it offline or in his private conversations with people. But the lone cane who publishes for a mass media audience doesn't have the luxury of doing so, and owes it to that audience to be more balanced in his reportage if he claims to be an impartial, balanced voice. And it's funny that everybody who actually has these biases that I speak about are the first ones to talk about their honesty and impartiality. Bullshit. No, they're not. And that's the problem that I'm trying to address here too. Now, if you think that this is all harmless pontificating by a public that is entitled to their own opinions, with which I have another issue with, but let that pass. Let me remark that one very well-known writer I know, whose work on rum as a whole is exemplary, is so clearly biased in favor of a side here that the moment I see him publish anything about Barbados or Jamaica, I almost never bother to read it anymore, because what's the point? His mind is made up. His bias is right there, and nothing I or anyone else can say, including, surprisingly enough, the provision of facts which you might think he'd be interested in, can shift this immovable point of view. That's the difference with the preference, which allows for facts and evidence to be weighed and permits a modification of a point of view, which is then not set in concrete. You see? Now, can one appreciate or impartially consider a rum if one disagrees with or disapproves of the company that makes it? This was an issue that haunted Flor de Caña about a decade ago. Remember how much shit they got for the chronic kidney disease business? I argue that while any consumer can do what she wants because they have that right, since it's their money going out the door, a reviewer and a writer for the public cannot be so blasé about what they're putting into the public arena, because anything else, if you start to take sides, would not be in service to the consumers for whom they should be writing, but for producers on whose behalf they have now become unwitting shills themselves. And this goes beyond writers. I mean, there's the hypocrisy of liquor store proprietors speaking for Barbados, wearing the t-shirt, decrying Maison Ferrand's shenanigans in public, while quietly stocking Planteray on their shelves. It's not the greatest example of putting their money where their mouth is. And then there's showrunners of international rum festivals. They start to get involved or favor one or the other, or even exclude them altogether. You know what? Surely there's more than moral indignation at work here, and it starts to become obvious that it's all about the money, as I am convinced it always has been. It always strikes me as odd that the loudest commentators never see a contradiction in taking aim at Planteray at every opportunity, while being completely unable to identify a rum from there in a blind taste test. Never seem bothered by not having all the facts, and yet opining on things that are nowhere near as clear-cut as they make it seem, or that the business case behind the scenes that motivates every single player is always left out of just about all discussions, except in the most general way, which are then portrayed as if it was all a black or white, good versus evil situation, when the real story is much more complex and nuanced. But then, as I found out, big picture perspectives, critical thinking, and understanding of irony, or even, God help us, a sense of humor, is way beyond most of these sanctimonious loudmouths who pontificate so often. I can tell you this for sure. Most people who observe these ongoing social media brouhahas from the sidelines without ever commenting themselves tell me privately that they just wish all parties and their enablers would just calm the fuck down. Because since they are not part of the solution, it is clear they are part of the problem, and they perpetuate it ad infinitum. And for all the histrionics and hate directed at this one company, Planteray isn't going anywhere, hasn't gone anywhere, and surely isn't going to. In summary, it's really quite an emotive matter, all this fallout, and I'm trying hard to be polite, but sometimes, I just saw another one of these stupid, heated commentaries go up on Rum subreddit not too long ago, a bit more polite than usual, but you know what? It's just never going to stop. And at some point, somebody has to inject some sanity into this discussion before it really and truly gets out of hand. And this is one reason I wanted to put this out there, and I'm going to issue this warning to everyone. I once said that, the hate and the invective on this matter had gotten so bad that I have no idea where it's going to end. People are already not speaking to each other about the subject and sundering professional and private friendships over it. Is it really going to be a fistfight starting on the floor of a rum festival somewhere between the adherents of one side or the other about something somebody said in an almost forgotten post from 6 months before? Have we really gotten to this level of Trumpism that this is where we are all now? It's just like, guys, people, let's just calm down, please. And so that's it from me. 4 parts on one of the most divisive aspects of our little world. If you have a comment, and I'm sure you will, and it's not going to be good, just let me know what it is. Yeah, comment away. I'm really nervous about posting this because I know better than most how bad it can get. But I do it not because I particularly like the target that I'm painting on my back, but because I think it's time somebody does say something and nobody else seems to want it. So I guess I'm just the last guy left standing with the musical chair in his hand. So that's it from me. Take care, everybody.